Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock, so let's get started. As usual, we'll start with the fire code. In the event a fire alarm sounds, please remain in the auditorium and stay seated. Should there be a need to evacuate, a Springmore staff member will direct you on how to leave in an orderly fashion. Please remember not to use the elevator and to go to a red pole once outside. So Brandon's the only staff person I see here, so I guess that's you if we have. Are there any of you who are here at a resident association meeting for the first time? We have a roving mic there. If you'd introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Joe Goslin. I live in South Village Valley, and I'm a volunteer driver for Meals on Wheels.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
You knew as well?
Anyone else?
Okay.
Okay, we're glad you're here. I have one announcement, and that is that at 4:15, immediately after this, there will be I don't know, was it a performance or just playing of musicians that call themselves the Sawmill Road Quartet, made up of 3 residents, Brent Smith, who on the clarinet, Marlene Lambert on piano, and David Rodger on bass, along with a friend from Chapel Hill, Dick Sloan, who plays the trombone. And they will be playing music that's Dixieland infused, beginning at 4:15 in the Ammons room. Jim, I'll recognize you to introduce our program.
Thank you, Alan. And again, I want to thank all of you for coming to these presentations, and also those of you who may be watching on 1341. Again, my thanks to Charlie Bryan for making that possible for you to see it. And I remind you, as I do every time, that this is recorded, and within 48 hours you will be able to see this presentation as well as any other presentations of the Residents Association meetings on the resident portal. All you got to do is go look for them. Today, House rules will again apply, and that is we ask you not to interrupt the presenter with questions and comments. As soon as the she's completed her presentation, we will bring a microphone to you if you have any questions or if you had any comments. And as a result of that, everyone in the auditorium will be able to hear, as well as those on 1341, as well as those who are watching the recording perhaps later on. This morning, I opened my email, and the first email that I had this morning was, I have a family emergency and I will not be able to make the presentation this afternoon. Now that can give a vice president a heart attack, which it almost did, but I then read the second sentence, which says, but my assistant, Amy, will be there. And so I breathed a sigh of relief. As a result, we have our program today on Meals on Wheels. I think I've said to this group at least twice, and I'll say it one more time, why we're having this group here. This group here was originated at Hillier Memorial Christian Church, which is my home church. It started out with 10 volunteers. I know every one of those 10 volunteers. The one who was giving credit for delivering the first Meals on Wheels, her picture was in the News and Observer a couple of months ago when they celebrated their 50th anniversary. And she not only was a church friend of mine, but also was my neighbor. My wife delivered Meals on Wheels for over 10 years. And in many cases, I was her driver. And so Meals on Wheels is personal. That's the reason I wanted to have them here today. Amy Ackroyd is going to be our presenter. She's originally from Birmingham, Alabama, but moved here over 30 years ago when her father accepted a position in the Department of Education at NC State University. Amy holds a Bachelor of Science degree from NC State University. She now lives with her husband and her cat in Southwest Raleigh, where she enjoys gardening and reading and arts and crafts. She has a background in education, recruiting, and nonprofit fundraising. And her current position is the Assistant Director of Development and Communications for Meals on Wheels of Wake County, where she assists in all facets of fundraising and communications. Amy, the podium is yours.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction, Jim. And hello, everyone. Nice to speak with you today. I'm glad I could make it in Mary Kate's absence. But I wanted to kick things off because I've, seen amongst the crowd a couple of people saying, "Oh, I volunteered with Meals on Wheels. Oh, I know Meals on Wheels." I'd love to see a show of hands, if you've heard of Meals on Wheels before prior to today. Okay, so a lot of people have heard of it. And then raise your hand if you've ever volunteered with Meals on Wheels before. Oh, wow, still a lot of hands. I'm glad to see that. And then raise your hand if you know anyone who receives Meals on Wheels services. A couple of hands too, okay. Well, y'all will have a little bit of a background for what I'm presenting today, which is great. Let me get this presentation pulled up, and we'll get things started. Okay. First, we're going to start with a little bit of a history lesson about how Meals on Wheels came to be. So way back in 1965, there was a law passed called the Older Americans Act. And the Older Americans Act came about because people started to notice there's a lot of unmet need for services for seniors, whether that was nutritional services, safety, housing. Lots of things were not really addressed well, and they wanted to create a sort of a legislation that can help address better those senior service needs. So this legislation established authority for grants to states for community planning and social services, research and development projects, and personnel training in the field of aging. The law also established what's called the Administration on Aging. And those organizations are spread nationwide and administer these newly created grants to serve as a federal focal point on all the matters concerning older people. So this was a really important legislative act that was the foundation for Meals on Wheels, and I'll describe why. So fast forward a little bit to 1972. In 1972, there was an amendment made to the Older Americans Act, and it specifically established a senior nutrition program. Like I had mentioned before, the Older Americans Act kind of generally addressed issues affecting senior citizens, but there wasn't a really solid plan for how to address gaps in senior nutrition. So this amendment helped to create that, and it's the foundation of Meals on Wheels because it was the specific conduit for grants and federal funding about nutrition for homebound seniors, or to create other congregate dining facilities for seniors to get together, have a little fun, but also have that reliable access to nutritious food. So 2 years later, in 1974, and for those of you who are quick at math, that was 50 years ago, we had our first delivery from Meals on Wheels of Wake County. A group of 10 volunteers got together and said, hey, there was this new legislation that's passed that provides grants and funding for a senior nutrition program, but we really need to kind of get things off the ground and running. So they were able to do all the administrative things necessary to start Meals on Wheels of Wake County, and it was 10 volunteers just delivering 10 meals, but if you fast forward again to now, we've actually delivered over 11 million meals in Wake County, and we use about 2,200 volunteers across the county to facilitate those deliveries. So just those first few meals really kind of set the trajectory for all these many years later and all the meals that we've been able to serve since. So that's a little bit of the general history of how we got started, but let's now talk a little bit more about what we do and how we do it. So our program serves lunchtime meals to over 1,800 homebound older adults and persons with disabilities in Wake County. Our outreach consists of hot meals to homebound individuals, communal dining for adults 60 plus at our friendship cafes, and frozen meal service for dialysis patients and other homebound individuals in isolated areas. Over 2,200 volunteers help us deliver these meals Monday through Friday, each day of the week. Okay. So let's break down what that means a little more specifically. So hot meal delivery service is by and large the biggest part of what we do at Meals on Wheels. Hot meal delivery service is for residents of Wake County who are 60 years old and over and are homebound and can't leave their house, drive, or do anything outside of their home that doesn't require assistance. We also have criteria on our application for these homebound meal delivery services that ask some questions to just kind of make sure that the applicant is a good fit for those homebound meals, because if they are able to leave the house, we have other services that they could use as well. So if anyone is ever interested in applying for a hot meal delivery service, what that would look like is either themselves or a loved one could either call our office and fill out the application by phone, or you can go online and fill out our application there. Our client service coordinator reviews the application, helps work out what the best fit for your meal service needs are, and then gets you started. And even though so Wake County is obviously really big. We don't just all operate out of one office. We have 11 separate offices all across the county. And depending on where a person lives and where they need their hot meals from, it will come from specific sites. So, for example, we have our main headquarters in Blair Drive, which is in downtown Raleigh. We have Cary, Zebulon, North Raleigh, Knightdale, lots of other places. So whatever the closest site to the resident is where those meals would typically come from. Frozen meal service is another popular option that we have. So, like I said, we have those 11 different sites spread across the county that meals are delivered from by volunteers. But what if there is someone who lives on the outskirts of the county who's very far away from any of those home-delivered meal sites? How do we serve them? And what we do is we have staff drivers who deliver a week's worth of meals to those residents, so that we can make sure that we're getting them food even though they're not really close by to one of our sites. This is also really helpful for any of our clients who have consistent dialysis appointments or medical appointments that keep them away from home during regular meal delivery hours. It's a very popular part of our program, and we're glad that we can offer that. We also have our hospital to home program. So this one's a little bit different. Let's say that there's someone who typically can kind of take care of their own meal needs and doesn't necessarily need a lot of interventions. If that person were to suffer a fall or a big injury and they land themselves in the hospital to home program will be there when they're released to their home so that we can provide meals and regular check-ins from our volunteers while that person just kind of gets back up on their feet. And the way that people are referred to the hospital to home program is typically by a healthcare or medical professional who can kind of speak to the nuances of what that individual's needs are. And then we've got our friendship cafes. So our friendship cafes are super fun. As you could probably tell from this picture, this was our Christmas party at our Wendell Friendship Cafe. We have 11 different friendship cafes all across Wake County, and these are for anyone who's over 60. There's no parameter on anything else apart from just being over 60. You can come enjoy lunch. We have a lot of programming and activities that happen at our friendship cafes. Apart from the obvious holiday parties and birthday celebrations that we regularly have, we'll have programming from the Poe Center, who does a lot of exercise and nutrition classes for our seniors. We'll have chair yoga. That's a really popular one that we do. We'd really just like to bring in different community programs that are just fun and can get everyone active and socializing and just having a nice time before lunchtime happens. If anyone's ever interested in going to a friendship cafe, all they have to do is call the specific friendship cafe location so that they can reserve their meal and let them know when they're coming by so we can have everything ready. And for those of you who have the brochures, you can see that there are the phone numbers and the email addresses for those friendship cafes provided in there. They're a very popular option, and during COVID, we obviously had to shut a lot of them down. And after COVID, we were able to reopen them all, and we really invigorated them. They're a lot of fun. All right, so moving into volunteers. With our hot meal delivery service, when you think about how many meals that we deliver every day, it's like, gosh, we probably don't have enough staff for that. And that's because we utilize volunteers like many of you in the room are probably familiar with, that get these meals out into the community. So many of our recipients tell us that the best part of meal delivery is the friendly, caring visitors that they receive each weekday. Volunteers can be the only contact that recipients have during the day and provide an important safety check to help ensure our neighbors' well-being. They're the eyes and ears of Meals on Wheels and can help us extend our outreach beyond mealtime needs. So for any of you who have volunteered, we really thank you. You've provided more than a meal. You've provided that important safety check and just a really reassuring check-in and friendly visit for people who may not otherwise see another individual that day. Volunteering typically takes a person about an hour to 90 minutes. Meal delivery drivers are by far our most needed volunteer opportunity with the amount of meals that we're putting out each day. We have a variety of other volunteer opportunities to choose from, though, for both groups or individuals, depending on how you'd be interested in volunteering. Some people volunteer every day. Some people volunteer once a week, once a month, or even just once a year. And we don't mind it. We will take any help whenever you can provide it. We're always happy to introduce you to the process of volunteering, answer any questions that you might have, and just really kind of help accommodate your needs, because we can't do it without our community, and we can't do it without the help of people like you. So it's a great way to get involved in your community if you are interested in doing something like that, just because it only takes such a short amount of time but really has a lasting impact. So I talked about a lot of the how and the history, but let's talk a little bit more about why. So Meals on Wheels allows older adults in Wake County to maintain their dignity and independence and remain in their homes. When a volunteer delivers a meal to a homebound recipient, we're not only providing a meal, but we're also providing a visit and a checkup. It's comforting to family members to know that someone is stopping in daily to make sure that everything is okay. Over the years, we have touched so many lives in Wake County and beyond by reaching out to seniors and people with disabilities to keep them connected to our community. So I know that it says it's comforting to family members to know that everything is okay with their loved one, but many of the clients that we serve don't have family, or they don't have friends to come check in on them. So we're really providing a lifeline to people who don't necessarily have any other means of community to come visit them. So that's an important part of the program as well. So let's talk a little bit more about the specific definitions that are really important in Meals on Wheels. So food insecurity is obviously one of the biggest drivers in a person's need for meals. That's defined as the condition of not having access to sufficient food or food of an adequate quality to meet one's basic needs. And there's a couple of different ways to look at food insecurity. So marginal to food insecure means that you've reported a reduced diet and nutrition quality and variety, but typically report fewer indications of reduced food intake. So in a more understandable sense, what that means is, you're kind of skipping some meals, you might not be eating the highest quality of food, you might not really even notice that you're not getting your nutritional needs met, but something's just a little off. And so having a prepared meal from Meals on Wheels, it's not only giving you that regular, reliable meal, but we work with nutritionists to get a really strict nutritional profile for the needs of a senior diet. Low to very low food insecurity is what people typically think of when they think of food insecurity. So that's reported multiple indications of reduced food intake, reduced nutrition, disrupted eating patterns, and skipping meals. So this is something that's a little more noticeable to an individual. They might, have specific nutritional deficiencies. They might just regularly feel hunger and not have the food to alleviate that. So regardless of whether it's marginal to the very low food insecurity, our job at Meals on Wheels is to just provide reliable, healthy food to anyone who needs it. More specifically in North Carolina, when we think of older adults, it's kind of hard to quantify, okay, how many older adults are there in North Carolina? Well, data indicates that North Carolina ranks 8th in the nation for people 60 plus. So we have one of the highest senior populations of any state in the United States. Since 2019, we have more 60 plus residents than the population of 18 and under. So over 23% of our population is over 60. Of that 60 and older population, 9% live below the poverty line, and we'll talk more about how poverty is defined in a couple slides down the road. 43% live alone, so almost half of seniors in North Carolina live alone. 81% have at least one chronic health condition. 52% have 2 or more chronic conditions. And statewide, over 7.5% are food insecure, which is considered 14th in the nation, meaning that 7.5% of seniors have limited access to adequate nutritious food on a daily basis. So that goes back to that food insecurity definition we were just talking about. Now, this one was a little shocking even to me. So Feeding America is an organization that provides data and statistics about hunger across all segments of the population. And according to their 2020 study, the Raleigh metropolitan area ranks 2nd highest in the country for senior food insecurity. So a lot of that was informed by the pandemic, but a lot of that is because of some of the just regular things that older adults face in our community. So that specifically means that over 11.6% of our senior neighbors in the Raleigh area, just around here, not even necessarily in Fuquay, Wendell, in Raleigh, do not have reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable and nutritious food. That was pretty shocking to me, just given, how much is going on in Raleigh. We're a pretty, happening town. We've got a lot going on. We've got a lot of, developments happening, but a lot of our senior neighbors are just not getting their most basic needs met, which is very upsetting. And then you can see these statistics below right here, and it ranks some of the other highest locations. So we are just beneath New Orleans, Metairie, and just above Memphis, Tennessee, in terms of the highest rates of food insecurity. So we'll come back to that definition of poverty and what that can mean for seniors. So across the United States, nearly 7.4 million seniors have incomes below the poverty line. And the way that the poverty line is kind of currently defined is an income of about $240 a week or less. And as you can imagine, for anyone who's been in a grocery store lately, things are pretty expensive. And after housing, utility, medical expenses, you might not have a lot left in that small pot of money to get some of the most basic healthy groceries. Half of seniors that live alone, which as we just said in North Carolina is almost half, lack the financial resources to pay for basic needs. Basic needs being food, medicine, housing, utilities. And Meals on Wheels America has reported that older adults living in poverty are nearly twice as likely as those living above the poverty level to have limitations on their ability to live independently. So that means, living on your own without a lot of assistance from outside agencies just to kind of get your basic needs met. So before COVID, nearly 9.7 million seniors nationwide were threatened by hunger, and 5.3 million were food insecure or very low food insecure, as those definitions we referenced earlier. And we know that after COVID, this has had, as I'm sure you've all remembered during COVID, things changed a lot, and not always for the better in terms of how you got your food, your groceries, how expensive things got. So we expect these numbers to be a lot higher. So we talked a lot about food insecurity, which is obviously an important tenet that we address at Meals on Wheels. But we like to say that we're more than a meal. We're doing a little bit more than just giving you a nutritious, reliable meal every day. We're addressing other factors that seniors face, one of them being isolation. Isolation is defined as without relation to other people or other things or being separate. Nationally, 1 in 4 seniors does live alone, and 1 in 4 reports feeling lonely. Among older adults who have difficulties with daily activities, 2 out of 3 receive limited or no home or community-based care. In North Carolina, we know that there's about half of the population of seniors that does live alone, and the state ranking for risk of social isolation in the United States, North Carolina ranks 28th. So we're somewhere in the middle, but we could obviously do a lot better. When a Meals on Wheels volunteer comes and delivers that meal to a homebound senior who's living alone, who doesn't have a lot of the basic resources that they need, they might be the only person that they're seeing that day. And that's so much more important than just the meal itself. It's a connection to community. It's someone to say, hey, I'm really not feeling well. Can you call 911 for me? That has happened all the time with a lot of our clients. Our volunteers are interventionists for some of those more emergency situations that can come up with our homebound seniors. Outside of isolation, safety is a really big issue. With the daily meal delivery that we're giving, we have oftentimes discovered emergencies that have happened with our homebound seniors. I included a little anecdote here from the daughter of one of our clients. She said, "My mom had a very serious fall in her home in late June. Had it not been for the conscientious volunteers delivering Mom's Meals on Wheels that day, we would not have known until sometime later. Thank you so much for calling me at home. You participated in saving a life that day." So this actually happens more often than you would think. When a Meals on Wheels recipient who receives those home-delivered meals doesn't answer the door for their delivery, doesn't answer the phone when the volunteer tries to call, we have a protocol set in place. We have a client services coordinator who immediately reaches out to that client and tries to call them again, see what's going on. If they don't reach them then, they immediately call their emergency contact. Their emergency contact is instructed, hey, so-and-so did not answer the door for their meals today. Would you be able to go check on them? They know you well. You'd be a safe person to come to the door in an emergency, or maybe you have a key. And oftentimes the senior who has not answered the door has had a medical emergency. And without that regular check-in, there might not be a fast intervention to that situation. So for the children or loved ones of seniors who are living at home receiving Meals on Wheels, it's a really important safety check for situations like that, for people who can't just regularly be checked in on. According to the CDC, over 3 million seniors are treated in emergency departments for fall-related injuries. So we know this is not something that happens infrequently. It's something that happens a lot to folks. And for anyone who doesn't necessarily have community close by or regularly checking in on them, it's a really important intervention for safety. My text got a little wonky on here, but I'll try to read it anyway. So what factors drive the need for Meals on Wheels? Our nation's senior population is growing exponentially. I know we talked a lot about the senior population nationwide, but let's think about what that's going to look like in the future. So the population of seniors is set to reach 93 million in the next decade, with 118 million expected by 2060, increasing the number of seniors today by more than half. So right now, 1 in 5 Americans is 60 or older, but we know that the older population is going to be a lot bigger in the coming years. Over 12,000 people each day turn 60. The average life expectancy today is 79 years, and we do know that that's increasing. So we want to make sure that as the elderly population grows, we have the right interventions in place to help support. Wake County Census data reports that an average of 62 people move to Wake County each day. So if you do some quick mental math there, knowing that the senior population is growing, the Wake County population is growing, you can certainly bet that Meals on Wheels of Wake County will have more seniors in Wake County to take care of. Over 46% of Wake County's overall population growth in the past 10 years has come from people aged 55 and older. Hunger and social isolation not only jeopardize the health and well-being of older adults, they also place a significant strain on our country's healthcare system and economy. Of course, it's very important for us to take care of each individual senior that, is in our care. But when you think also outside of that and outside of how Meals on Wheels can benefit things from a societal standpoint, it's an interesting breakdown. So there's over $51 billion associated with malnutrition in seniors in terms of economic burden. Older adult falls cost about $50 billion in medical cost each year across the country. Among seniors, the additional Medicare expenditures associated with social isolation are estimated to cost $6.7 billion each year. Medicare spending has more than doubled since 2005 and is disproportionately concentrated on older adults with multiple chronic conditions or functional limitations. 5% of Medicare beneficiaries account for 41% of Medicare spending. And this is the statistic that I always think is the biggest takeaway. 1 year of Meals on Wheels home-delivered meal services is equivalent to the cost of 1 day in the hospital and 10 days in a nursing home. So 1 year, 1 day. If someone is receiving Meals on Wheels and a volunteer catches that they've fallen and is able to, appropriately get them first aid in a manner that keeps them out of the hospital, that is a massive cost savings for that individual. So just to break down more specifically what those numbers look like, 1 day in the hospital typically averages about $2,000. 1 day in a nursing home is about $240. And one Meals on Wheels home-delivered meal is about $10. So I know I've talked a lot about the problems and the woes that we're facing, but I want to leave things on a little bit more of an uplifting note. So our frequent in-home visits provide unique opportunities to meet nutritional needs, combat social isolation, address safety hazards, and provide holistic care. 9 out of 10 seniors say that Meals on Wheels helps them live more independently, and this is across the nation. Daily home-delivered meals keep 8 out of 10 recipients who have previously fallen from falling again. A typical meal delivered by Meals on Wheels meets the dietary guidelines set by the Older Americans Act nutrition program. Meals are often tailored to meet medical needs and cultural preferences. 2 out of 3 recipients report that the meals that they get make up half or more of all the food that they have available to eat that day. 8 out of 10 recipients say that they get to see their friends more because of the congregate meals, our friendship cafes. And then 58% of home-delivered meal recipients live alone, and for many of them, the person delivering the meal is often the only person that they will see that day. So I know that I gave you a lot of numbers and a lot of statistics, but you might be thinking, well, what can I do to support Meals on Wheels, or how can I pass some of this information along? So if anyone ever wants to volunteer, we would love to have you. That's definitely our biggest need, and it sounds like a lot of you have some experience with Meals on Wheels programs already, which is wonderful. If you were ever interested in volunteering, you would just go to our website, fill out a volunteer application, and then we would get you started. Another important facet is advocating for these issues that address seniors. I think a lot of people, when they think of Meals on Wheels, they just think of it as Uber Eats or just kind of takeout meal delivery, but it really is so much more than that. There's a lot of other needs that are being addressed outside of just receiving that meal. So if you can communicate the importance of Meals on Wheels to your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, the more people know about it, the more people we can help. Also, if you have a Facebook or social media or anything, we are regularly posting on social media if you're ever interested in that. It's a lot of fun to see some of the photos that we have. Also, you might know a senior who could benefit from Meals on Wheels services, whether that's going to a friendship cafe, receiving home-delivered meals, anything like that, please pass along to them that they're more than welcome to apply for our services. And then donating. Financial contributions directly support the purchase of meals, produce, services for all of our seniors that we serve. Donations make up about half of what we get for our expenditures. So it's a very important part of our program. Okay, I have a video to show you, to kind of show you what this looks like in practice. I know I talked a lot about theory, but I'd love for y'all to see what it actually looks like at Meals on Wheels. Okay.
This is a celebration of Meals on Wheels for 50 years.
Let me try that again. Technical pause. All right. Did I do it? Oh no. I know, right? I heard someone say technology. I feel that. Well, I guess while I figure that out, we could probably open it up for questions. Okay.
Questions, comments while she... Up. You gotta wait for the mic, please.
Where does the food come from?
Great question. So our main headquarter office, we call it Blair Drive. We share a kitchen space that's operated by an organization called Food Runners Incorporated, and we partner with them. They make all the meals really early the day of for our delivery, probably like 5 a.m., and then we have staff trucks that go and disperse those meals to our cafes and our home-delivered meal sites. So they're all made right on site at our Blair Drive facility. Good question.
Is the food delivered warm or cold? Is the food delivered warm or cold?
So all of our meals are delivered hot. The question was, is the food delivered warm or cold? So it's all hot. We actually have really strict guidelines about temperature for the food because it is a food safety issue. So as the food is taken from the kitchens, everything's put in like these big, they're called like carafes, big hot carafes that keep everything really hot. And then once the meals are delivered to the next site, they're temped again to make sure that appropriate food safety temperature. Great question.
Hi. Are you still getting money from the federal government? And if so, what is the percentage of your budget that comes from federal funding?
Great question. So our last fiscal year, we received about 60% of our funding from the Older Americans Act funding. We call it Title III. So that's the federal government, and we also count that number in for any of the state and local grants that we receive as well.
I've been a Meals on Wheels volunteer now for several years. How do we make this stop? and at one time, there were some really nice things that we could deliver that would last over the weekend. And that was and particularly in the wintertime, that was a very needed program, I thought. And
Yes.
that apparently dried up.
Yes.
But I was wondering if there's any hope of something like that happening again.
Great question. This is something I'm super passionate about. So we, after COVID, like around the time of COVID, I should say, we received CARES Act funding, which is federal government funding for COVID alleviation. And with some of that money, we were able to provide meals over the weekend. Typically, we only do weekday meals for our folks. But because of that funding, we were able to address some of the weekend needs that a lot of our seniors had as well. But that funding was during a limited window. So it ran out and we had to stop that weekend meals program. But that's something that we are actively pursuing, trying to get back because we know that was really popular for everybody. I mean, who doesn't like a bunch of meals for the weekend? They were good too. All right.
Try one more.
Okay. Let's see. Cross your fingers. Let me see if I can do it this way. No? Yeah, I don't know.
We gave it a try.
Okay.
We gave it the old college try. Thank you very much, Amy. I think you'll have to agree with me, that was really a very informative program, which I knew it would be. What I'd like to do is to ask any of you who are currently volunteering or any of you who have volunteered in the past, as soon as Alan adjourns the program, please come up to the front of the room, and John Robinson, our editor of the Herald, wants to take your picture so we can include that in the next edition of the Herald. Any of you who are currently, any of you who have in the past been involved with Meals on Wheels, as soon as we adjourn, please come up to the front so we can have that picture made. Okay, the announcement coming in June the 10th at 3 o'clock. We're going to have a representative from the Department of Justice, Sarah Welch, who will be talking to us about scams, fraud, and internet security. You don't want to miss that one. All right, Alan, let's do some door prizes.
Okay. Will you pull a ticket out of this? And the winning number is 148058. One 480578. Way over here. And now,
Pull red. Can you stay around for a few minutes?
and the second winning number is 026893. 893.
Amy has agreed to stay around for a few minutes afterwards, so if any of you have any specific questions or comments, or just if you want to thank her for coming or thank her for being a part of Meals on Wheels, please feel free to do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy, for being here. Enjoyed it. Enjoy the springtime. By the time we meet again, we'll be into summer. So we are adjourned.